Why did you start taking benzodiazepines?
Well, in over the Christmas vacation in 2016, you and I and Julian and my son and Tammy went out to Vancouver Island to visit her parents and siblings. And when we were there, you and I and Andre, your husband, ate something that didn't agree with any of us and had a very severe reaction to that.
I'm still on board. It was sodium
that seems to be the most
metabisulfite.
logical conclusion, but I was, the same. We had the same symptoms. I don't know if I was any more seriously affected than you or not, but I was freezing cold for about a month. I couldn't get warm no matter how much I wore. I couldn't stand up without fainting. I couldn't sleep. I don't think I slept at all for something on the order of 3 weeks.
Yeah, people like you went on Joe Rogan and talked about a sulfite reaction you had and how you didn't sleep, and people commented that, oh, it's not possible to stay awake for that long. But if you actually look into sodium metabisulfite allergies, the symptoms that we experienced aren't unheard of. There are papers.
Well, it's also impossible to stay awake voluntarily that long. That's not the same as not being able to sleep. Those are very, very different things. Whatever. It's possible that when I was laying there thinking I wasn't sleeping, that now and then I drifted off and would wake up and not notice. I mean, I can't eliminate that as a possibility, but I can certainly tell you that I slept little enough so that it was exceedingly unpleasant. It's a very long time to stay awake. And when we went back to Toronto, our family physician prescribed benzodiazepines, which are often used as a sleeping aid and an anti-anxiety medication, and something called Zopiclone, Imovane. And I hardly took the Imovane at all, maybe 4 or 5 times. But I took the benzodiazepine the way that it was prescribed, twice a day, 0.25 milligrams. And that seemed to bring the symptoms to a pretty rapid halt, which is also part of the reason I didn't need the Imovane. And then there were so many other things going on around me at that time that I never really thought about it again. You know, I thought that it was a relatively harmless drug, and I was taking it in a prescribed fashion at not too high a dose. And I developed symptoms that I now recognized were associated with its use. Weakness on my left side, and like a feeling of detachment from people around me, people I loved, some decrease in the ability to experience joy. But it wasn't until much later that I actually associated with the benzodiazepine use.
Yeah.
When your mom got so sick, my anxiety levels had been climbing up again.
Well, yeah, that was unbearable. I mean, the response I had, if you're told your parent or your wife of almost 30 years has no chance and is going to be dead in the next 10 months. That's what we were told. That surgery doesn't help and that chemo doesn't help and that this is a fast growing cancer and you're screwed no matter what. Right. That's what we heard in one day. So yeah, anxiety.
Well, then we went all over North America, to New York and to Houston and to LA, looking for different opinions before we decided to settle on surgery.
And everyone gave us the same opinion.
Yes, which was that nothing is going to help, but surgery was probably the best, the best low probability bet.
Yeah. So
I asked my doctor to increase the benzodiazepine dose, but what seemed to happen as a consequence of that was that I just got more anxious. So again, in retrospect, it seems like I had a rather uncommon but not unheard of reaction to benzodiazepines, where increased dose makes anxiety worse instead of better. So then at one point when things weren't getting better and Tammy was still in the hospital and I was trying to take care of her, we had lots of help, I stopped taking them entirely and tried ketamine, which is a treatment for depression. Well, neither of those were a very good idea as it turned out. So I had to stop taking benzodiazepines entirely. to take the ketamine.
Oh, yeah.
Then I didn't go, then I stayed off them for something approximating a week.
It was a week.
Knowing that was a very bad idea. And I often think I should have known these things because I did a lot of scientific research when I was a graduate student on alcoholism. And I knew that alcohol and benzodiazepines and barbiturates were all the same chemical class, at least in terms of their effect on neurological effects. But what I knew about benzodiazepines was that they were comparatively safe compared to barbiturates, which they basically replaced. But that's much less true than everybody who's taking them hopes. And they're very widely prescribed. And I don't remember what the probability of developing a dependency on them is if you take them for more than 2 weeks. It's 50%, I believe.
It's something like 50%.
Yeah, if you take them for 2 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, and over 4 weeks, it's much, much higher.
Right.
And most people prescribe them, stay on them for life. And that could have something to do with the fact that they're very difficult to get off of.
Yeah, well, it was unbelievably unpleasant. I mean, it was unbearably unpleasant. And so I started tapering off when Tammy was in the hospital, but I couldn't push that too fast because it wasn't bearable.
And what do you mean it wasn't
bearable? My anxiety levels went higher than anything I'd ever experienced. And I also developed this condition called akathisia. And the best way I can describe that is that it was like being jabbed with something, with a prod, like a cattle prod, something electric or something sharp, nonstop for hours, for all the hours I was awake. It was absolutely, I couldn't sit or lay down or stop moving. And even if I did get up and move, it wasn't like that made it better. I just couldn't stop doing it. It was horrible. Akathisia is horrible. It's like being whipped. That's another way of thinking about it. Although I really think I would have, sounds melodramatic, but I think if I had to pick whipping or akathisia, I suppose it would depend on how big a whip. But
maybe not one of those.
It wouldn't be an obvious choice.
Those 5-pronged whips.
Yes. Yeah. Cat of nine tails, that might be worse. But it was plenty bad.
Yeah.
And things just fell apart more and more. Tammy recovered rather miraculously in the middle of August. But I continued my sort of downhill spiral and ended up in a clinic on the Eastern Seaboard that claimed they could do a rapid benzodiazepine detox, which was a complete bloody lie.
Yeah, well, what we figured was we didn't realize that there was this physical dependency until you stopped to try and do the ketamine. And then we tried tapering and you couldn't stand it because of the akathisia. And so we thought, well, let's go get some professional help.
Right. And I went to the clinic on the understanding that they could do a multi-day detoxification and treatment for withdrawal. And when I got there, what they told me instead was that they'd substitute one benzodiazepine for another, which wasn't the least bit helpful because clonazepam was already a long-acting benzodiazepine, and they're easier to wean off than the shorter-acting benzodiazepines. And they had nothing to offer, essentially. I came out of that clinic worse than when I went in. So,
like significantly worse.
Yes.
On 2 more sedative-like drugs in order to dampen down the akathisic symptoms.
Right, which wasn't helping much.
Given the fact that the benzodiazepines were causing the akathisia.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and then I went back to Toronto.
That's November.
And things maintained their downhill trajectory, apart from the fact that Tammy was recovering quite nicely, which of course was great. But then I ended up in the hospital in Toronto, and the hospital I ended up in was also worse than useless.
Yes.
So, and I don't remember this part of it from December 15th onward. You and Andre, your husband, took me out of that hospital, and we went to Russia, of all places, near Moscow, to try a treatment offered by a clinic there that used
They use propofol and Dextor.
right propofol as a heavy sedating agent, which basically made me unconscious for 9 days.
Yeah, so you were completely out for 9 days.
Well, I also had pneumonia, which I developed apparently in the hospital in Toronto. Well, yeah, it was quite entertaining, the whole string of events.